All right, I will say good morning. Good morning. Let us begin by thanking all of our sponsors. To thank our TALMUD TORAH sponsors for the month of Menachim Av, the Tilson and Wohl families, sending their love from Eretz YIsrael and inviting us all in Eretz Hashem to join them Bekarov. Our week of learning sponsors, Ingrid Fishman and Lynn in memory of their mother, Charlotte Gevantman, Zichron Livracha, and sister Judith Gantman, Zichron Livracha. We hope that in the merit of our TALMUD TORAH, the Neshama will have an aliyah, and the families in Necham. And of course, as always, we dedicate our learning in the schus of our precious hostages. May HaKadosh Baruch Hu return them to their mishpachos b'shalom and b'karov. And in the schus of our holy soldiers, may HaKadosh Baruch Hu allow them to be successful b'chol ma'aseh yedehem, and also come back to their mishpachos b'shalom and b'karov. But with that, let us begin. We have a lot to do today. An exciting week ahead of us in Eretz Hashem. Halabai, a week of Besoros Tovos Klal Yisrael, a week of Yeshua's V'nechamas, a week of Gula, a week of Mashiach, a week of the third Beis Hamikdash in Eretz Hashem, and a week of beautiful Basra. So we are picking up today's daf is Mem Zayin. We're actually going to pick up on Mem Vav on the Beis 46b, 5 lines up from the bottom. Tan Rabbanon, introducing the new sugya. So Tan Rabbanon, Orev Meid Lelova. So Moses, remember again. We've been speaking previously, and of course, and a mazel tov to Alan Wiseman on the birth of a great-granddaughter. Mazel tov. And Eretz Hashem should be zocha to see the parents, the Torah, the chupah, the ma'asim tovim, and continued in Eretz Hashem growth of the Wiseman mishpacha, following in the ways of Yaakov Saba Kadisha for many generations to come. So the Gemara says as follows: Tanra Arev Meid Lelova. So also we are continuing in the discussion in general about testimony and about who is fit to go ahead and give testimony. Now the truth is, this is coming on the heels actually of the sugya about who could create chazaka. So kind of a corollary concept is who could be made, who is permitted to give testimony on behalf of someone else. So the Gemara says as follows: Tan Rabbanon, Arev Meid Lelova. A guarantor can go ahead and testify on behalf of a borrower. Now we'll say, remember again, in general, the way it works, right? Hilchos Eidos, the laws of testimony 101, is that you are only believed to be a witness if you are not nogeya bedavar, right? You have nothing to gain. You have nothing to gain from the testimony. Otherwise, if you have something to gain from the testimony, then halacha l'maisa, we can't believe you. So the Gemara is very interesting. An Arev, a guarantor, is believed to testify on behalf of the borrower. Now, that would seem to be an inherent conflict of interest. So just to illustrate this case, for example, Ruvain lent money to Shimon. And now what happens? And now Shimon has property, and that property is being contested. I'm the guarantor for Shimon. So I happen to know about Shimon's holdings. So Shimon asks me to come to Beis Din to testify on his behalf that he is the true owner of this contested property. So the halacha is, I am believed. Now that's very interesting. Why is that interesting? Because as the guarantor, I have a lot to gain from this testimony. What do I have to gain? Again, if Shimon doesn't have that property, and that's the only property that Shimon has, and now Ruvain called, and now the debt is due, so Shimon has to pay back Ruvain, and Shimon has no money, guess who Ruvain's coming to? He's coming to me, the guarantor. So interestingly enough, despite the fact that it would appear that I am an ogeya b'davar, I have a vested interest in this testimony, I am still believed. So the Gemara says, no, with a caveat, it only works if Shimon the borrower has other land. Because in this way, if Shimon the borrower has other land, then even if he were to lose this court case, and let's say again, the contested land were to leave his possession, halacha l'maisa, he would still have other land with which to pay the debt, and therefore halacha l'maisa, I am not considered to be a nogeya b'davar in this eidos. Incredible. Malbeh meid lelova. Similarly again, a lender can testify on behalf of a borrower. Says the Gemara, but 1 second, isn't that a conflict of interest, right? Isn't there again an negios? To which the Gemara says, again, we'll say, so let's say again, I lend Reuven $1,000. Now Reuven has land. The ownership of that land is contested. I happen to know that Reuven is the owner of that land. I am permitted to go ahead and testify on behalf of Reuven, as long as what? As long as Reuven has other land. Because this way, again, it happens to be the source of my repayment is secure from a separate place. Therefore, again, I'm permitted to go ahead and testify on his behalf. Incredible. So I'll say, again, you see the common theme, right? The halacha is, You can't testify for someone when you have a vested interest in that testimony. But again, if your personal interests are secured from another source, then you are permitted to go ahead and testify for that person in the contested area. Okay, next. Lokeach Rishon, Meir Lokeach Sheni. A first purchaser has the ability to testify on behalf of a second purchaser. Okay, so what's this case? So take a look at the Rashbam for just a moment. This is the first wide line. It's a really interesting case. Lokeach Rishon, Meir Lokeach Sheni. Watch this. Kigon. Ruvain shemachar sada achas leLevi, v'achar kach sada acheres leYehuda. Okay, so Ruvain is a guy. Ruvain sells two fields. The first one to Levi and the second one to Yehuda. Why did Rashbam? And this consistently happens. I'm not sure why he leaves out Shimon. There must be something to this. No, because it's not the first time. It's interesting. I don't know. There must be a reason for it. Okay, but Lamaisa, he goes ahead and so Ruvain sells two parcels of land, one to Levi and one to Yehuda. Al Yehuda. Now someone comes along, guy, right? And again, Rashbam doesn't call him Shimon, but all right. But what happens? So now he goes ahead and another guy comes along and contests the ownership of Yehuda's land. Lomar Gazla Ruvain Mimeni. Okay, so we'll say, so now watch out. So step one, Ruvain has two parcels of land, or maybe more parcels of land, but two parcels of land that he's selling. Step two, Ruvain sells the first one to Levi and the second one to Yehuda. Next, someone contests Yehuda's ownership, saying Yehuda, I'm not saying he didn't buy it from Ruvain, but Ruvain stole it from me. So therefore, again, the sale that Ruvain made to you, Yehuda, is void. I'm taking back my land. Okay. So we'll say, so now what happened? Mayed lo Levi li Yehuda. So now what happens? Yehuda, who's purchaser 2, goes to Levi, purchaser 1. Can you testify on my behalf that I am the true owner of the land? Okay, so what's the halacha? So Levi, purchaser 1, is permitted to go ahead and testify to Yehuda, for Yehuda, purchaser 2. Dahainu lokeach rishon, lokeach sheni, umeyed lo shihi shalo, v'lo shal ma'arar. So Levi, purchaser 1, could testify on behalf of Yehuda, purchaser 2. Now, you'll say to yourself, okay, like who cares about this? No, this matters a lot. Watch what he writes. For who? Yehuda od karka acheres shalakach miruvain sheyuchal balchov the Ruvain lebos chozemer. So we'll say, okay, let me explain this to you. Here's the way. Okay, here's what's at play over here. Ruvain is the seller of the properties, right? Now, it is possible that the properties that Ruvain sold were encumbered. Now, we'll say the way it works with property is like this. So let's say Ruvain owes money to Shimon, right? Ruvain owes money to Shimon. So now Ruvain has a $10,000 outstanding debt to Shimon, which means that Ruvain's properties are encumbered by the debt. Now Ruvain's selling off property. So the way it works, of course, is let's say Ruvain sells off property number 1, right? Parcel number 1. And now let's say the debt comes due. Where does Shimon collect his money from? From whatever property that Ruvain has in his possession. What if Ruvain sold off all of his property? Where does Shimon, the creditor, collect from? And what's the answer? The last sold property. LIFO. Oh no. Yeah, LIFO. You're last in, first out. Yeah, LIFO. Would that be good? Yeah. Well, it's really lo-fi. It's last out, first in. Right? I've just created a brand new accounting concept, by the way, right? Lo-fi. Right? Last out, first in. In other words, supposed to say, so that's the way collections work. So Lamaisa, again, now, when creditor comes to Ruvain and he says, pay back my debt, Ruvain no longer has any property in his possession. Creditor says, no problem, I'm going to claw it back. Who does he claw it back from? The last purchase sold, and you work your way back from there. So he looks at the last parcel sold, we go from there. If that's enough to repay the debt, fine. And then he keeps making his way back. So now watch this. So now, in this case, Ruvain, the borrower, sold off 2 parcels of land. Parcel 1 to Levi, parcel 2 to Yehuda. And now what happens? So now Yehuda's ownership of the parcel is being contested. So now Levi, Gemara says Levi is permitted to come and testify on behalf of Yehuda that Yehuda's ownership. One second. Levi is an ogeh b'davar, right? Levi has a vested interest. What's his vested interest? He wants Yehuda to hold on to that property. Why? Because should Ruvain's creditor come after sold properties, he's going to Yehuda first. But if Yehuda loses his property, then who is creditor coming to? He's coming to Levi. So how could Levi testify on behalf of Yehuda when Levi has such a vested interest? To which the Gemara now says, back to the Gemara, this is Lokech Rishon, Mei Lokech Sheni, V'hu de Isle Ara Achrisi. That is only if Yehuda has another property that's not being contested that he also bought from Reuven. See, the way the case works is like this. If Reuven bought one parcel of property, and Yehuda bought two parcels of property, everybody bought from Reuven. So now, one of the parcels that Yehuda bought is being contested. So now the Gemara says, Levi, purchaser one, can testify on behalf of Yehuda, purchaser two, that the property belongs to him, as long as Yehuda has another uncontested parcel that he owns, that he bought from Reuven. Because this way, again, should Reuven's creditor come after sold property, there's another property that Yehuda has that he's coming first. Therefore, again, Levi's believed to testify because he doesn't have any gius. Ultimately, it doesn't benefit him, or it doesn't benefit him at all because there's another source of collection for Reuven's creditors. Incredible. Fine. The Gemara says that's Lokech Rishon Me'ed Lokech Sheni V'hudi Isle Ara Achrisi. Good. Next, top of Mem Zayin. Kablon. I will say, so I'll tell you what's interesting about it. So there's an Orev and there's a Kablon. What's the difference between the two? An Orev is a guarantor. Now I will say the way an Orev works is, so let's take a simple case, right? So Reuven lent $10,000 to Shimon. Shimon asked me to guarantee the debt. So I'm guaranteeing it. What is a typical Orev? Typical Orev says that in the event that the borrower cannot pay back his debt, so lender could come to guarantor and ask for repayment. But lender has no ability to come to guarantor unless, of course, what? The borrower himself can't satisfy it. In other words, the first stop for collection is the borrower. A kablon is different. Kablon, look at the Tab Rashbam 47a Mem Zayin Aleph. Kablon. Arev Kablon, Shekibel Hamaos Miyado Shal Malvan. I will say, so in fact, the Rashbam really calls, it's not really called a Kablon, rather it's called an Arev Kablon. So I will say, so what is an Arev Kablon? An Arev Kablon is a guarantor, but this guarantor operates in a very different way. In fact, in this case, what ends up happening is, so let's say same case, right? Reuven lent $10,000 to Shimon. I am now Shimon's Arev Kablon. Watch what happens in a situation like that. First of all, Reuven, the lender, gives the money to me. I then give the money to Shimon. So Arev Kablon shekibel hamaos miyado shel malba v'nasan liyado shel loba v'zeu dino. What's the halacha on Arev Kablon? Demimi sheyirtza hamalba yiparet tchila. Wow. So an Arev Kablon has a much more heightened level of responsibility. The way it works in the Arev Kablon is lender has the right to go to whoever he wants first. So if lender wants to go to borrower, he can go to borrower. If lender wants to come to Arev Kablon, he comes to Arev Kablon. That's the nature of an Arev Kablon. So as opposed to a regular Arev guarantor, where lender never has a right to go to the guarantor first. Guarantor is the safety net. He's the insurance policy. If borrower defaults, then lender could come to him. And Arev Kablon is different. An Arev Kablon, this type of situation, you have the lender has the right to go ahead and come to the Arev Kablon first. Lender says, I don't want to deal with the borrower. I want to go right to the guarantor. You have that right. I will say, you wonder, why would anyone ever have such a situation like this? You could see this. When can you see this? In a borrower, perhaps who's impoverished, a borrower who has very poor credit, right? A borrower who has no assets. So remember, I will say in general, from halacha, so lending money, you're already lending without interest, right? So and most you're getting back is really your principal. So let's say somebody needs money, but you're very hesitant to lend such a person like this money. So if you have an Arev Kablon, you know your money is guaranteed, and you also know that you never have to get into the uncomfortable situation of dealing with a borrower, right? So you have the right. So what about Arev Kablon? So we'll say, so Arev Kablon, so I should say where it says Kablon, Amri le Meyid. So actually, I'm sorry. So let's finish up the Rashbam. Ava Arev Stama ein tovin la'arev tchila at shabin mabel lelova bedin ve'chayvu l'shalim. So the Rashbam is just contrasting it in a regular case of guarantor. So a lender never has the right to go to the guarantor unless, of course, he's first going to the borrower. So Arev Kablon, lender could come right to the guarantor, right to Ariv Kablan. Regular Ariv, regular guarantor, lender could only come to the guarantor after he first went to the borrower. So now the Gemara says Kablan. So we'll say, so this, what we call this Ariv Kablan, does he have the ability to testify on behalf of the borrower? Does he have the ability to testify on behalf of the borrower? So the Gemara says, so Amrile Meid, so some say he is permitted to go ahead and testify because he's just like a guarantor. Just as a guarantor has the ability to testify on behalf of the borrower, again, provided that the guarantor has land, right? that he has assets. So to an Ariv Kablan could also, and others say no, an Ariv Kablan cannot testify on behalf of the borrower. So what's the pshat? So the opinion that says that an Ariv Kablan is permitted to go in and testify on behalf of the borrower, because an Ariv Kablan is no different than a regular guarantor. And let's listen to this. Others say no, he's not allowed to testify. Why? Rabbi said this is different. In the case of an Ariv, in the case of a regular guarantor can testify on behalf of the borrower as long as the borrower has another source of repayment. Because then we're good to go. In other words, he doesn't have a vested interest. He knows the loan could get paid. An Ariv Kablan is a little bit different. For an Ariv Kablan, it's actually in his best interest that the borrower has multiple parcels of land. Why? Because from the Ariv Kablan's perspective, he wants the lender to have a choice as to where he's going to collect from. Because since the Ariv Kablan knows that at any point in time the lender could come and just collect directly from him, the only way that's not going to happen is if the lender feels that he can get a good source of repayment from the borrower. So therefore, again, from the Ariv Kablan's perspective, he wants the borrower to have as many parcels in his possession as possible. That's why he is no gei b'davar. He does have a vested interest in this, and that's why this opinion will say, it's better for the borrower to have multiple parcels of land. Because this way, again, when the lender comes, he has the ability to take whatever he wants. Okay, so Rabbi says, just know in general, the Rambam Paskins, like all of these previous cases, that halacha l'may, so all of these people, previous people mentioned, are allowed to testify as long as the people that they are testifying have additional sources of repayment. And therefore, again, going through the list, right? So the guarantor could go ahead and testify on behalf of the borrower as long as the borrower has another parcel of land, right? The lender could testify on behalf of the borrower as long as the borrower has an additional parcel of land. First purchaser could testify on behalf of second purchaser as long as second purchaser has an additional parcel of land. The Rambam also paskins that an Ariv Kablan, right, this heightened level of guarantee. I don't know in English if there's like I'm sure there must be different technical terms for different levels of guarantors also. Seth, I see you perking up over there.
He's really a co-signer because his liability is.
Am I getting charged for this? I just want to make sure that. Okay, all right. I knew it.
I think it's a co-signer as the Kablan because his liability is exactly as extensive as the borrower's.
Interesting. So co-signer versus a guarantor. So an Ari will be a guarantor, an Ariv Kablan is a co-signer. Right. Interesting. Okay. Right, interesting. Okay, good. So let's say, so now Lemaisa, what's interesting over here is as follows. So the Rambam Paskins, that's great, actually, that's great. A co-signer, or an Ariv Kablan is not permitted to go ahead and testify on behalf of the borrower. And I will say it makes perfect sense because he's really on the hook. He's on the hook. Even in other words, here's remember with the co-signer, at least from the Ariv Kablan, even if the borrower has all of the money, all of the assets in the world, if for whatever reason the lender just feels like going to Ariv Kablan first, he has that right to do so. So the Ariv Kablan always has a vested interest in having the borrower have as much property, as much assets as possible, so that the lender doesn't come to him. Incredible. I'm Rabbi Yochanan. But I'll just mention, by the way, how incredible it is that we are learning these Gemaras about a guarantor on Shuvah Shechava on the week of Tisha B'Av. You know, Rashi HaKadosh already comments that when HaKadosh Baruch Hu gives us the Mishkan, right? Why is the Mishkan called the Mishkan? Mishkan, Rashi HaKadosh says, is from Lashon of Mashkon, collateral. That HaKadosh Baruch Hu, the way he created this whole system is that he realized Klal Yisrael would sin. Because we're people. So what did the Ribbon Shalom do? He created something, he created a collateral. That in the event, a guarantor, so to speak, that in the event should Klal Yisrael sin, HaKadosh Baruch Hu could take something else away from us. Rather than punishing the Klal, rather than punishing us, the Ribono Shel Olam was able to go ahead, so to speak, invent his fury on eitzim va'avanim, on sticks and stones, on a structure. So Mishkan, from the beginning, Mishkan was always called the Mashkon. Kadosh Baruch Hu gave us this thing to be, it's our guarantor. It's our guarantor. Kadosh Baruch Hu says, you know what, I get upset at you, I'll never destroy the Klal, but I'll take something else from you. And I will say, this is what's the lashon of the kapitel? Lam natseach mizmor lada. It's not lam. It's lam natseach. Bo goyim benachal asecha. Timu es heichalecha. Samu es Yushalayim leiyim. The kapitel that speaks about the destruction of the Beis Hamikdash, and it begins lam natseach. Lam natseach to the conductor, which is like a song. So the Gemara says, Kina mi boyele. What do you mean lam natseach? It should be a lamentation. So Rabbi said, here's the most incredible thing. That as much as we lament the loss of the Beis Hamikdash, it was the loss of the Beis Hamikdash that secured the future for Klal Yisrael. The Beis Hamikdash was our guarantor. The Beis Hamikdash was our guarantor. HaKadosh Baruch Hu, right, was Hevi Chamasa Itzim Va'avanim. He vented his fury on a structure, and Klal Yisrael survived. We lost so much, but what we lost ensured our continuity and ensured our eternality. So it's just incredible that here we are learning these Gemaras about the Kabbalah, about the Arif, about guarantors, and as much as we can mourn something that we haven't known for thousands of years. But Lamais, it's always important to know that which HaKadosh Baruch Hu took from us was that was our guarantor, in order to ensure our survival. And Halavai will be Zoche Eretz Hashem. Will be Zoche Eretz Hashem to earn it back, the Karaf. So also the Gemara says weiter. Am Rabbi Yochanan, Uman in lo chazaka. An Uman doesn't have chazaka. As we already learned this before, right? A craftsman doesn't have chazaka. Why doesn't the craftsman have chazaka? In order to establish chazaka, you need two things, right? Number one, what do you need? Taina, right? Taina. Number two, residency, right? Or duration. But the truth is, you really need a third thing also, which is, it has to be that the only reason the object is with you is because you're the owner. If there's another plausible reason as to why the object is with you, you can't establish chazaka. So therefore, again, an uman, a craft, right? So you can imagine, like, I give my watch to a watchmaker, right? And the watchmaker claims, you know what, I have it, it's mine. I'm mine. So how do you claim ownership? In other words, there's another plausible reason as to why the watch is with you, because you're a watchmaker, you're an uman. That's what you do. So an uman doesn't have chazaka. However, ben uman yesh lo chazaka, but the son of an uman, ultimately again can establish chazaka. Take a look at the Rashbam for just a moment. Uman ayin lo chazaka digitani masnisin. Aval ben shel uman ukigon she'ein ha ben uman yesh lo. I'm sorry, shel uman ukigon she'ein ha ben uman yesh lo chazaka. Now we're going to be talking about over here is the son of an uman could go ahead and have a chazaka. Now we're going to see that presupposes he himself is not an uman, right? So in other words, an uman doesn't have a chazaka. The son of an uman can have a chazaka, assuming the son himself is not an uman. Similarly, again, aris eno chazaka. A sharecropper can't establish chazaka for reasons, right? We spoke about this before. A sharecropper can say, "I've been on this field for 3 years." Yeah, uncontested. Yeah, that's because you work for me. Yeah, of course you've been on there uncontested. Otherwise, why wouldn't you? You're my sharecropper. So an aris can't establish chazaka. Ben aris yesh lo chazaka. But ultimately, again, the son of an aris can establish chazaka. Again, we'll define the parameters of this in just a little bit. Gazlan u ben gazlan ein lahen chazaka. Wow, a thief, the son of a thief, can't establish chazaka. However, ben beno shel gazlan yesh lo chazaka. The grandson of a thief can establish chazaka. All right, so let's analyze this. So it's a heichidami. What are all these cases over here? So in other words, the first couple, in other words, uman ben uman, aris ben aris, those seem to be similar cases. So what's the case over here? I asu b'tanos davuan afilu hanach namilos. We'll say, so again, what's the case? let's go with sharecropper, because that's I don't know, at least in my mind, that's like the clearest one. So, right, Reuven's a sharecropper, or I would call it Yaakov is a sharecropper, right? He's been by a sharecropper for years. So obviously, if Yaakov shows up and says, hey, I've been on Silber's land for 5 years uncontested, I'm clearly the owner, we say, no, you're not, you're the sharecropper. So we'll say, so now Yaakov has a son, Reuven. So now when we say Reuven can make it, so what's the taina? So if Reuven's coming, or if, right, so the Gemara says, if at the end of the day Reuven is coming with his father's taina, now look at Rashi. Rashbam. Ida asu hanach bana b'taina sadavuan da amri avinu harishanu lanu. Right. So we'll say, so if Yaakov, right, the son of Reuven, the sharecropper, is coming and he's saying, "This is my land. My father bequeathed it to me. My father died as part of my inheritance." So I suppose that's not going to be a good taina, because then the son is coming with the same taina as the father. That, of course, is not going to work. And furthermore, again, if that is, the Gemara says, so I'll say, so now, if you're going to tell me that ultimately, again, they're coming with the taina of their fathers. I'm sorry, go back to Rashbam for just a moment. If they're coming and they're claiming, our father died, and he left us this land, ben Gazlan so again, if they're coming all with the taina of their father, then the same way that the Ben Gazlan doesn't have a chazaka, the Ben Uman and the Ben Aris should also not have a chazaka. So the Gemara says, but we'll say if they're coming with their own claim. Let's see, these people are coming with their own claim, right? It just happens to be that the father is a Aris, or the father is an Uman, or the father is. But if they're coming with their own claim of chazaka, so the Gemara says, "Afilu ben Gazlan." I'm sorry. I'm sorry, I read that wrong. If ultimately, again, they're coming with the taina of their father, afilu hanach namilo, then even the other sons, the son of the Uman, the son of the Aris, should not have chazaka. And ultimately, again, if they're not coming with the tainas of their father, afilu ben Gazlan namilo. To which the Gemara says, afilu ben Gazlan nami. Sorry. Then even the son of the Gazlan should be able to establish chazaka. In other words, say, what are the sons coming with? If the sons are coming with the taina of their fathers, so none of these sons have the ability to establish chazaka. Even the sons, right? Even the sons of the Aris and the son of the Uman. If they're coming with their own tainas, then Abba say, right, whatever their own taina is, that even the son of the Gazlan should be able to establish chazaka. Lo tzricha, we'll say, no, rather, what's the case? The ka'amri edim befanenu hodalo. So we'll say, so what's the case? The case is where witnesses come along and they say that in our presence, the owner of this land admitted that he sold it to the father. Hanach, so in other words, father Uman, father Aris, father Gazlan. Right, that's the case over here. So now, ultimately, sons are coming, and the sons are bringing witnesses with them, and the witnesses say that the original owner of the land sold it to father Uman, father Aris, father Gazlan. So now watch this. Hanach ikalamemer kushta ka'amri. So in the case of father Aris and father, these are Jewish people, by the way, father, right? Right, so right, father Aris, father Uman, right? Father Aris, father Uman. Ultimately, again, we believe it. Okay, so now the sons are bringing testimony, right? The sons are bringing testimony that Allah L'maisa, again, the original owner sold it to their fathers. And that's believable, that's credible. Hi, now so why don't we believe father Gazlan? Right, so now the son of the thief comes along. He's also bringing edus, that's what? That the original owner sold the field to his father, the thief. So why not believe that? So we'll say, watch this. Hi, avagav da'odi nami lo mehemim. No, we don't believe the witnesses in this case. Why don't we believe the witnesses in this case? Kidrav kana. Now we'll say, we'll see. We believe the witnesses. We don't think the witnesses are lying, but we do not. We don't see this to be actionable testimony. Why? Kidrav kana. This is fascinating. Rav kana. Ilav de'odile havememati ulachanre l'shachvar. So Rabbi say the assumption is like this: if you're dealing with a thief, that means you're dealing with someone who is willing to go ahead and go to extremes in order to get what they want. such a person generally is not a trustworthy individual. And generally, dealing with such a person, you don't really have too many options. So witnesses come along and they say, you know what, the original owner sold it to Father Gazlan. That might be true. Original owner maybe did sell it to Father Gazlan, but he didn't want to sell it to Father Gazlan. He did not want to do that. And therefore, again, in halacha, this would not be considered to be a real sale. So therefore, again, we will not award it to son of the Gazlan. So I will say, so this is very interesting. So therefore, what comes out of this halacha is as follows. As much as we said that an uman, an aris, and a Gazlan, none of them can establish chazaka, right? Gazlan, it kind of like, of course a Gazlan doesn't have chazaka, right? But uman and aris, the son of an uman and the son of an aris can establish chazaka. What's that case? They can't be coming with the taina of their father because then there's no chazaka. Rather, the case over here is they're bringing eidos. What's the eidos? That the original owner sold it to their father uman, father aris, right? Okay, so it's theirs. In the case of a Gazlan, even if the son of a Gazlan, who himself might be a very reputable individual, but he's bringing witnesses that say that the original owner sold it to my father, the Gazlan. The Chiddush of the Gemara is like Rav Kahana, we don't accept that testimony. Again, we're not saying the witnesses are lying. We know, we take the witnesses at their word, that the owner of the property sold it to the Gazlan. We just probably feel it was a coerced sale. And because it was a coerced sale, we're not going to honor that sale, and therefore put that property with the son of the Gazlan. Incredible. So Rav says as follows: Apamim shafilu ben bino shal Gazlan nami elo chazaka. Wow. What I will say, it could happen sometimes that even the grandson of a Gazlan doesn't have a chazaka. How so? Hechidami kigon the kaasi b'ta'anasa da abba avdavua, where he's coming with the taina of his grandfather. So the Gemara says, so if he's coming with the taina of his grandfather, then ultimately again he doesn't have a chazaka. I will say, by the way, what a tremendous Musar Haskell. The things we do and the choices we make and the lifestyles we create do not only impact us, but they have a trickle-down effect throughout the generations. It's the same way, you know how every parent has that moment where you realize, oh my gosh, my kids actually know everything that I do, right? And I try to put on such a good facade, right? Or that time that you think you're having a disagreement with your wife and you're not disagreeing in front of the kids, but the kids sense the tension, the kids know what's happening, right? Children are perceptive, and what I do as a father and what I do as a husband and what I do as a patriarch of a family changes the familial fabric of the family. This is bein l'tov, bein l'ra. And if I do good things, Baruch Hashem, I could uplift my mishpacha for multiple generations. But if chas v'shalom, I do things that are not good, then I could change, unfortunately, again, I can negatively impact the familial fabric. As I look at this lashon of the Gemara, Pamim, shafilu ben bino shal Gazlan ein lo chazaka. They will say sometimes, even the grandson of a thief, ein lo chazaka, doesn't have any chizuk, doesn't have any strength. Sometimes even the grandson of a Gazlan could be impacted by the negative and deleterious actions of his grandfather. We'll say it causes us to really think about how we act, what we do, and how we behave in the context of building our mishpachas. Now, by the way, the great news is, whatever is true in the negative, if it's true that Pamim Sheben Ben Oshal Gazlan Ein Lo Chazaka, the good news is whatever is true in the negative is all the more so true in the positive. So if it's true that sometimes, unfortunately, Ben Ben Oshal Gazlan Ein Lo Chazaka, that if Zayd is a thief, it could impact even the grandchildren. So halachas kama v'kama, when we make the right choices in life, do the right things in life, how much we can impact not just ourselves, but future generations as well. Rabbi Yochanan. Kigon shows good. So the Gemara says, good. The Gemara says, Hechi dami Gazlan. What's the case of Gazlan? Rabbi Yochanan, Kigon shehochsak al sadazu begazlanusa. Ultimately, again, where a person went ahead, look at the Rashba for just a moment. Hechi dami Gazlan. It's like about 6 lines up from before it gets wide. Hechi dami Gazlan. The Rashbam says, Oso she'en lo chazaka. What's the example of a Gazlan who doesn't have a chazaka? So Gemara says, Gigon shehochsak al sadazu begazlanusa. Look at the Rashba. Sadazu ubahu sadahu de'en lo chazaka. Aval b'shar sadas yesh lo chazaka. So Rabbi say this is incredible. So let's say again, you made a chazaka on a field through stealing it. Now the Rashbam points out over here that just because you stole one field doesn't necessarily impact your ability to make a proper chazaka on other fields. I would say, speak about this all the time. We all live within consistencies, and being deficient in one area does not make me a deficient human being as a whole. We all have areas of weakness. We all have areas of deficiency. I could be bad in certain areas or deficient, but that doesn't prevent me from being great in other areas. So the truth is, on the field that I stole, I can't make a chazaka. But it doesn't prevent me from making a proper chazaka on other fields which I acquire legally. Rav Chisda Amar Kigon, the base ploni shahargin the fashos al iskei mammon. So Rav Chisda says it could also apply like a certain family who he remains unnamed. Anshe Risham Hayu Shayim Makir behind Rav Chisda Shahargin B'Nafshos Al Iskei Mamon Elan Chazak B'Shum Karka. And Rabbi says it's interesting. So Rav Chisda comes along and says, like that family who he does not name, probably a good idea, that they kill people when they don't get the business deals that they want. Now, to their credit, they pay. Right? To their credit, they pay. But they don't really leave much of a choice in terms of whether or not you're engaging in the transaction. So it's interesting. Rav Chisda is saying is like this: Gezel theft doesn't just have to be when you steal something without paying. Coercion is also called theft. Now, the truth is, in halacha we have two different terms for this. There's gezel and there's chamas. Chamas is when you force people to give you something. I'm willing to pay for it, right? But I'm going to force you to engage in the transaction. So that would also be considered to be a case of gezel for which you cannot establish chazaka. Incredible. Tanabanan. Uman elo chazaka. So I say ultimately again, an uman doesn't have chazaka. Yarad me'emna. So yishlo chazaka. If he's no longer an uman, he does have a chazaka. Okay, Rashbam says, right, yarad me'emna. So b'shuv machzik yishlo chazaka. Okay, right. So let's say again. So uman, while he's the craftsman, he can't establish chazaka on property that relates to his craft when that property is in his possession. If he retires, then obviously he does have the ability to establish chazaka. Aris ein lo chazaka. Sharecropper can't establish chazaka. Yarad me'erisa. So yishlo chazaka. If he stops being an aris, he can't establish chazaka. Good. Ben shechal. So also listen to this. Ben shechalak. V'isha shenis gersha. Hare hein kishar kol adam. So we'll say. So listen to this. Ben shechalak. Ben shechalak means a son who is no longer supported by his father. Imagine that, right. So a son who's no longer supported by his father, right? Ben shechalak. So ben shechalak. So I say, so this is a son who goes out on his own. V'ishto shenis garsha, or a woman who got divorced. So we'll say, what's the halacha? Harei hein kishar kol adam. These are like all other people. In other words, we'll say. So remember, what did we learn before? That in general, a son, we saw this in the Mishnah, a son cannot make a chazaka on the property of his father. And a wife can't make a chazaka on the property of her husband. Now again, why? Because the son on the property of his father and a wife on the property of her husband are just like a sharecropper. Right? Remember again, you can only make a chazaka on property if the only reason you would be there is because you're the owner. But if there's another reason why you would be there, so a son, obviously, right, is in the property of his father. A wife is in the property of her husband. So the mice, again, they can't make a chazaka. However, the Gemara says, ben shechalak, if a son goes out on his own, or a couple gets divorced. So now let's say that son, who's now financially independent, is occupying the property of his father for 3 years uncontested, he can make a chazaka. Couple gets divorced, right? Reuven and Rachel get divorced. Rachel's been on Reuven's property 3 years uncontested. She can make a chazaka. To which the Gemara says, Hari Gishakaladam. So Bishlam ben Shechalak Itzterich. So I understand why I need the case of the son who goes out on his own. I need that case. Why? I would have thought, Achule Achil Gabe. So said, it could very well be that even if a son is financially independent, the father is mochel if the son uses his property. In other words, I might have thought that even in a case of financial independence, if the son uses his father's property for 3 years, the father's not going to say anything when his son uses his stuff. Right? Kamash malo, no. Kamash landalo. Kasha, that's not true. Not true. In other words, we'll say, once a son's independent, financially independent, again, the father would not allow his son to use the property for a prolonged amount of time uncontested. And if he does do so, ultimately he can establish chazaka. Kamash landalo. Ella isha shenis gasha pshita. Now, we'll say with a divorced couple, that's kind of obvious. Now, we'll say you have to understand something. The Gemara always presupposes that there's animosity in a divorce. That's always the concept of amicable divorce. It's not that Chazal didn't feel that could happen. Chazal just understand that is the exception, not the rule. Right? The rule is that there's animosity between people who were married and no longer married. Again, could you have amicable? Of course, but it's not the rule. Halacha always creates a framework around the norm. So therefore, again, I will say, a divorced couple, right? So now, watch this. So Reuben was married to Rachel. So obviously, when they were married, Rachel can't establish chazak in Reuben's property because she has every right to be there. It's all for her to be there. Now they're divorced. Now what happens? Rachel's been living on Reuben's property for 3 years uncontested. So the Gemara says Rachel could establish chazaka. The Gemara says it's obvious. Of course she can establish chazaka. In other words, why else would she be on Reuven's property if she wasn't the owner? This is very interesting. So I will say, what's the case? The case is a case of Safek Gerushin. Remember I will say this is like... What's the case of Safek Gerushin? Right? Reuven is getting divorced from Rachel. What does he do? He throws her a get. Remember, I will say, what's the halacha when you throw a get? First of all, the first halacha is you're not a mensch. Right? That's number one, right? But again, I will say that's the hashkafa, not the halacha. Right? So let's say he throws the get. Now, what's the halacha? The Gemara says, right? Karov la migurashes. Karov lo ena migurashes. Right? So if the get lands closer to her, she's divorced. Closer to him, she's not divorced. What about Safek Karov lo? Safek Karov la? We're not sure where the get landed. In other words, we're not sure if the get landed closer to him, closer to her. What's the halacha? Safek migurashes. Now, both say, what do you do in a case of Safek migurashes? What do you do? You have to give another get. So we'll say, so now watch this. We're talking about a case over here where, so Reuven divorced Rachel, he threw her a get. Safek karov lo. Therefore, again, we'll say she's Safek migurashes. Now, what's the halacha ultimately when a woman is Safek migurashes? The husband is obligated to still support her. Right? That's halacha. In other words, Reuven has the chiyuv of mezonos to Rachel, which makes sense because since they're not, in other words, the obligation for a husband to support his wife only ends with a get because, again, remember, with a get, what does she get? Ksuva. Right? So there always has to be a mechanism of financial support from husband or estate to wife. So when they're married, it's mezonos. When they're not married, it's ksuva. So therefore, again, until the point that there is a definitive divorce, he has to give him mezonos. So watch this. This is great. So Rabbi Shmuel So now watch this. So the Gemara says, any case where ultimately, again, Safek migurashes, husband is obligated to support his wife. So now watch this. So here's the case. Reuven threw a get to Rachel, Safek karov lo. Therefore, Safek migurashes, he has to divorce her again. He hasn't gotten around to it yet. In the meantime, what's happened over here? She's been living on a parcel of his land for 3 years. So now she comes to Beis Din. She says, "I am the owner of this land. I have taina, whatever. He sold it to me. I bought it from him, and I have residency. I have duration. I might have thought, you know what? No. That's not chazak. You know what that is? Because Reuven has an obligation of mazonos. What's happening over here? He's letting her live on that land not in lieu, but as a form of her mazonos. It's fine. You use the land, and take whatever the produce is, and that's your mazonos. Kamash Malon, the Gemara says, we don't say that. Kamash Malon, that as much as he owes her mazonos, he is not going to go ahead and, if you look at the Rashbam, and look at the first short line, Kamash Malon, the Habya Chazaka, that when she lives on that land uncontested for 3 years and claims ownership, that is a Chazaka, the Chayvan, the Hischil Begerishin, since they clearly began the divorce process, V'husonei la, and he hates her. Now again, I will say, this is why I gave the Hakdon before. How do we know? Again, the assumption is that where there is divorce, it is not amicable. He is not going to give her a piece of land for her mazonos. So this is very interesting. Rather, what's going to happen? What is he going to give her? He's going to give her mazonos. How much mazonos is he going to give her? How much is he going to give her? Exactly what he is obligated to. And when is he going to give it to her? When he is commanded by Beis Din to do so. he is not going to give it to her, ultimately, again, by giving her a parcel of land. So therefore, it's interesting. So even in this case of Safek Miguresh, as Rabbi was saying, they're divorced, but they're not divorced. In other words, there is still some level of marital bond over here. But right, and she's been living on this land for 3 years. Now she comes to basic claiming chazaka that she's the owner. I might have thought that we don't establish chazaka because since they're not fully divorced, maybe he gave her this land as her mazonos, and therefore again it's not hers. Kamash malon, no. That in this type of acrimonious type of situation, where clearly a divorce proceeding has been initiated, he's not giving her land, and therefore, if she has lived on this land 3 years uncontested, and she comes with taina that she bought it from him, she is established as the owner. She has chazaka. Incredible. All right, let's go weiter. The Gemara says, Amr Nachman, Amr Lihuna. So Rav Nachman said, Rav Huna said to me, in all these cases, Kulan Shevir Raya. So in all of these cases, ultimately, again, in all of these cases, when we say that these people own this property, right? All of these cases, the Gemara says, Ben Shechalak Isha Shenis Garsha Uman, right? Uman, who's no longer a retired Uman or retired Aris. All of these cases, when can the people go ahead and establish their chazaka? If they bring a raya. Rashi says, Shtar Mechira or Ede Mechira. They have a document. To sell, witnesses of sale, fine. So the Gemara says, Riyasan Raya Umamida Sadabiyadan. So I'll say, so ultimately again, right, Riyasan Raya, Miamida Sadabiyadan. Gazlon Shevi Raya, Ein Raya Sa Raya, Veimamida Sadabiyadan. So I'll say, it's interesting, because in all of these cases, essentially, if you're bringing a shtar, you're bringing Eidos, okay? So you have, in other words, we'll say, obviously, you do need some mechanism of proof to establish that you are the purchaser of this field. So Allah, whether it's Eidos, whether it's a shtar, fine. I will say the exception to this rule is a gazlan, right? A thief. Even if a thief brings a raya, this is very interesting, right? Even if a thief brings a document or he brings eidos that the original owner sold it to him, he is not established as the owner. So the Gemara says, okay, we know this already. My kamash malon, Tanina, we learn this. Lakach misikrikun, v'chazer v'lakach mibala bayis mekchobatel. So was it? Remember again, we had this case in Gittin. You buy from a sikrikun. What's a sikrikun? An extortionist. Extortionist, right? Someone who goes in and extorts property. So what do, right? I buy a field from sikrikun. Now I happen to know that this sikrikun extorted the field from Ruvain. So I want to be a good guy. I bought it from extortionist, and then I also go and I buy it from Ruvain. I buy it from Ruvain. In other words, I want to own it free and clear. So that's Talach. I said this is incredible. Mekcho batal. The sale is still not a good sale. Still not a good sale. Rabbi said that, interestingly enough, look at the Rashban for just a moment. Lakach missikrikun. First of the intermediate wide lines. He says, Megazlan, actually, let's finish. No, let's read here. Rashban. Megazlan nachri, horig nefashos, al iskema. Rabbi said, by the way, a sikrikun is not just an extortionist. A sikrikun is a violent extortionist. In other words, if you don't give it, look, there are different levels of extortion. So it's important. If you're going to get into this, you have to choose a niche, right? So there are regular extortionists and there are violent extortionists. What happens with violent extortionists? If you don't give them what you want, they will kill you. So that's the secret that we're dealing with over here. Shomerlo sakar kazu benichani umatana. So the Gemara says umatana zulo havi matana. So obviously, what ends up happening over here? So the violent extortionist comes to Ruvain, and he says to Ruvain, "Give me the field. Give me the field." Right now, the violent extortionist goes ahead and says, "But don't worry, I'm going to pay you for it." Right? To which Ruvain says, "No. You know what? We're so close. Why don't you just take it as a gift?" Right? So obviously, I will say such a transaction is not going to work because it's clearly made under duress. Now the chap is, even if I go back, so now so obviously, if I purchase it from the extortionist, ultimately again, still not the owner. So I have a great chap. I'm going to go back to Reuven and buy it from Reuven as well. The Gemara says it's still not mine. Why is it not? I will say skip to the last 4 lines of that same Rashbam. It's the last of the intermediate 4 lines before it gets totally wide. Afilu hachi lo kana lokeach the machmas pacha the sikrikon hiknu lo lokeach. The Chevan dein Rayas Lalkech Megazlan Raya Afilu Ki Hadar V'Zalim Balabayis Kol Shekein. The Kol Shekein dein Rayas Agazlan Atzmo Raya. So this is incredible. What the Gemara is saying is like this: when I buy from the extortionist, even if I go back and then purchase it from Ruvain, it's still not a good sale. Why not? Reuven is afraid. Reuven is afraid, right? That's Lashon Rashman. Afilu achi lo kana lokeach demachmas pachad desikrikon hikna lo lokeach. Reuven feels, right, at this point, Reuven is scared of the extortionist. So what is Reuven going to do? Say, Silber, no, I'm not selling. Give back my land. Give back my land. If Reuven demands his land back, what is he afraid of? What is he afraid of? That the extortionist is going to get wind of this. The extortionist is going to come back after him. So Reuven is paralyzed and therefore, again, feels compelled to now sell to me as well. So even though I'm trying to do the right thing, I purchased it from the extortionist and now I'm purchasing it again, ultimately, again, from Reuven. Still, my title is not a true title because Reuven still feels compelled to sell it to me under duress. La fuki midrav. I will say this excludes the position of Rav. What does Rav say? The Amar Rav, lo shana ela the Amar le chazek v'kani. So I will say even Rav holds that when do we say that ultimately if I purchase it from Reuven, that it's not a good sale? That's if Reuven says, sure, go ahead and acquire it. However, aval b'shtar kana. But if Reuven takes the time to write up a shtar, then that shows that Reuven is committing to this wholeheartedly. It's very interesting. The Gemara says, Kamash Shmuel and Kiddush Shmuel. Therefore, we'll say, Kamash Shmuel, we pass not like Rabbi, we pass like Shmuel. The Amar Af Bishtar Nami Lokana, Ad Sheyichtov Achrayis Nechasim. Okay, so now listen to this. So now, here we go. So I'll say, let's just plot this whole thing. So right, this Reuven owns a piece of land, he's minding his own business. Sikrikun comes to Reuven, extorts the property from Reuven. Reuven, quote unquote, gives it to Sikrikun, obviously under duress, not a true transaction. I buy it from Sikrikun. I know how Sikrikun got the property. I go to Reuven, I say, Reuven, you know what? I want to buy it from you also. I want to own this. Reuven sells it to me. So I will say the way we are paskening is like Shmuel, that halacha l'maisi, even if Reuven sells it to me, we don't view this as legitimate sale because we still feel that Reuven is doing this under duress. Even if Reuven writes it up in the shtar, we still feel that Reuven is doing it under duress. But can't there be a point where Reuven does it legitimately, where we know that, yes, how? We'll say how? If Reuven writes achrayis nechasim. Watch this. In other words, if Reuven says, fine, you know what, yeah, I'll sell it to you, let's write this up in a document, and Reuven guarantees the sale. So if Reuven goes so far to guarantee the sale, that is indicative that what? He's selling his belief shalem with a complete heart, and therefore again that is a bona fide sale. Isn't that fascinating? So in other words, if you just stam purchase it from Reuven after Sikri, that's not good. Even if Reuven writes a shtar. But if Reuven writes achrayis in the shtar, again, he doesn't have to do that unless, of course, this is a complete sale. The fact that he does that indicates that he's doing this belief shalem, and therefore, again, the sale stands. Incredible. Rabbi Misayim ba Mishmei Rav Nachman. Rabbi says ultimately, again, he understands this, right? Misayim, he closes out this ruling in the name of Rav Nachman. So he says as follows: Karka einlo. Ultimately, again, the original owner doesn't have karka. However, again, aval ma'os yeshlo. But he will have a claim ultimately again to money. What does this mean? Look at Rashbam. Karka einlo legazlon kimo shamarno ein ma'amid insad biyado. So this is very interesting. In the case of the gazlon, right? In the case of the thief, so obviously he's not going to have title to the karka. But what can he get back? He can get back his money. He can get back his money. So the Gemara says, right, Karka imla about ma'os yeshla. If you look at the Rashbam, it's about 5 lines in where it gets right about ma'os. Shenasal lo hagazlon lenigzal b'demei karkazu yeshlo. Shiachzirein lo hanigzal v'lo kansinale legazlon la'abid ma'osav. So Shabbos says this is very interesting. So Halach Lamai says, much as the gazlon can't go ahead and get title, right? He can't make a chazaka. So we're not going to give him a chazaka, but if the gazlon did pay for the field, so in other words, he's not as much a gazlon as much as he is a chamson, right? Ultimately again, even though he's not going to get title, we'll give him back his money. When is that so? That's with his witnesses that say that the gazlon paid for the field. Aval amru eidim befanenu hodalo lo. Watch this. If all there is eidos that the quote unquote seller / victim, right, says, oh yes, of course, the gazlan paid me for it, that is not enough to make the victim / seller / victim refund any money. Why? Because again, whenever you have a case of theft, obviously you're dealing with coercion, right, and duress. So because of that, if witnesses see something themselves, then that'll be actionable. But just based on what the victim says, we're not going to make that actionable because the victim is afraid, ultimately, again, of the gazlan. So therefore, we'll say, watch this. So therefore, the Gemara is suggesting is as follows. A gazlan cannot establish chazaka. So that we've already established. So let's say now he's not going to establish chazaka. However, he's not going to get the field, but we should give him his money back. But when do we give him his money back? When witnesses saw that the gazlan gave money. So okay, we're going to say gazlan doesn't get chazak. Give him back. We're not going to penalize him to keep his money. Give back the money. But if all we see, if all we have in front of us is what? That the aggrieved party, the seller/victim, admits that the gazlan paid him money, but we never saw transfer of funds, that's not actionable. We do not make the victim/seller refund anything. Why? Because what are we concerned about? We're concerned that maybe halacha l'maisa, there was never any kind of transfer of money. So why is the victim/seller saying there was money? Why? He's afraid. So because of that, we're not going to make him pay back because we're nervous that what would actually end up happening is he'd be reaching into his own pocket. So we'll say, we're going to stop with this. I'm just giving you coming attractions. I want you to come back tomorrow. So listen, this is a great case. And this is kind of like the corollary case. Amar Rav Huna, Tal Yuha v'Zabin Zvini. I will say this is fascinating. What happens if you force a person to sell something? I force someone to sell something. I force Ruvain to sell whatever it is. Doesn't make a difference what it is. Movable property, real property. I go ahead and I force him to go ahead. The Rashbam says over here, 6 lines up from the bottom. Misha talu oso o asolo yisurin ad shemachar v'kiba la'adamim va'omer wrote sa'ani. So literally you coerce a person, physical coercion, to sell something. I physically coerce Ruvain to sell something. What's the halacha? Zvine, the Gemara says, zvine. It's a good sale. The sale is halachically valid. I would say, now, whoa, my time, huh? This is fascinating. Kol de mazbin inish, ilav de anis, lo havi mazbin, dafilu haki zvine. So I would say, this is fascinating. The general assumption is people only sell off their stuff when what? When they are under financial duress, right? If I have everything I need, I'm not selling my property. The only time you ever sell something is because of financial duress. Yet we never say, well, he sold under financial duress, so obviously it's not a good sale. So what do you see from here? The same way that in generally I sell my property only under financial duress. So you see that a sale made under duress is in fact a valid sale. So the Gemara takes a tremendous leap and says, therefore, if you physically coerce someone to sell, the sale itself is illegal and valid. So I will say, I'm leaving you on this cliffhanger. Much more about this tomorrow. Shkayak, everyone. All right, Chevron Zoom. Have a great day. A good tavach.